Hello, everybody. This is a new layout that I just had, created fresh off the press. And with me, I have the wonderful Noukky from the British Hurricanes. Please say hello.
Hello, my name is Noukky. I'm working with C9 Esports at the moment as a team manager for the British Hurricane, which is the London Spitfire Academy team.
And
And since Joe loves my titles that I have on Twitter, I'm also the caretaker of players. I'm also the mom of Western Overwatch
she is.
and the organizer of tournaments.
That she is. Now, I've brought Noukky onto this very descriptively named show titled, I have no idea what it's going to be titled at the moment, but we'll get onto that, at a later date. But I've brought her along to kind of give a little bit more insight into some of the more or less kind of talked about positions within esports. So, observing or, product management or whatever that might entail. But team management is something that I think a lot of specifically people in Overwatch are getting into, and I don't know that they kind of have an idea of what is expected of them when they transition into working with an org, or perhaps even working with the Overwatch League. So I have here a member of Cloud9. She's best friends with Jack. They're like this, they go way back, drinks and all that. So Noukky, I wanted to kind of let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to your history as a
Mhm.
player, as a tournament admin. You've done a whole lot. You've done, you know, Lucio Ball tournaments. You've competed. What are some of those skill sets, or how have those skill sets that you've developed in your past experiences transitioned into working directly with players, keeping them happy, trying to manage their kind of morale? How has that helped you?
So one big part of that is that I was a player previously, and that helps me understand so much better what players actually need from managers and what players actually need from orgs. Like the kind of security that they would like to have, the kind of transparency that they would like to have, because I also had like bad experience with managers and people that kept their players in the dark
Mm.
and just let them like just thrown stuff at them basically without any preparation, without any communication beforehand. And this is one of the things I took away from being a player. And one other thing that I took away from being a tournament organizer, like you said, Lucio Ball. I did work for Blizzard for a short time for Contender Season 0 as an admin. And I organized my own tournaments in the beginning of 2017. Is that you can't be you didn't have to hold players accountable to what they do. You can't be too nice to them. You can't be like too forgiving, as bad as it sounds. They have their responsibilities too.
Oh, for sure. Now, would you say that that kind of came with that, very structured environment that, running a tournament has, where you have, deadlines and stuff? Was that kind of did that kind of prepare you, especially working with very large companies? Like you said, you worked with Blizzard, previously, and you've worked with a lot of big organizers in the esports space. Would you say that kind of prepared you for that same sense, where it's like, okay, we can't really fool around. This isn't the time to do this. It kind of, I wouldn't say hardened you, but really kind of opened your eyes to esports. Would you say?
Definitely. Like the tournament organizer times were those times where I just slipped into esports. Of
Mm.
course, like being a player is getting started in esports,
Mm.
but actually seeing what's going on behind the scenes and like coordinating all those different people that help make streams great or make tournaments great, which also includes the players and teams, is was a really great experience and helped me to develop my organizational skills.
Sure. Now, obviously, you are, the team mother of the British Hurricane. So I wanted to kind of pick your brain on how you really started with the team. How did that process go? Let's talk about like the original those guys roster. How did that kind of building process work? How did it start?
It started pretty pretty weirdly actually. Like I just came off of World Cup
Mm-hmm.
and had like a little downtime on my hands in terms of like tournament stuff, and since I was moderating one of the bigger competitive discords at the time, players started to know me. Like they started to know me in 2017 when I worked so much in tournaments, and two of more known players in EU, Henzo and Craggy, approached me. Hey, you're really good at organizing stuff. Would you like to help us build a team for Open Division? And so I just went in. I just didn't think about it too much. I was like, yeah, cool. I can book scrims. I can like record VODs, and this is how we started out. And then I helped them try to evaluate players, what I think was good about them, good about their attitude. I of course couldn't say too much about their skill,
Sure.
like about the specific mechanics, but I could always help them figure out which teammates would be like good teammates or which
Mm.
teammates would be willing to learn and willing to be coached.
So I want to put a pin in a lot of one of like those fun little topics that you
Mm-hmm.
kind of mentioned there. So I definitely want to come back and talk about you know how and who you've built those the team around, or not built a
Mm-hmm.
team around, but what are you really looking for in those players. I also want to kind of touch on the aspect of building a team. Again, what are you really looking for? What exactly goes into building a team? How do you reach out to sponsors? But I want to jump into, as a former player, do you have to kind of stop yourself when you're watching your team play, and you might have an opinion? Do you have that luxury to be able to kind of communicate them? Is that line of communication open that you can kind of reach out and be like, hey, what if we tried to do it this way? Now this is obviously going all the way back to the those guys days. That was the team previously named those guys that did get signed to the British
Mm-hmm.
Hurricane. Did you have that kind of interaction at that point, or was that something that kind of was established as the team kind of got more experience with you?
I think I always had those kind of influences on the guys. I always try to suggest them how to handle stuff or how to tackle certain things. Because I was back when I was a player, I was a Lucio shot caller too, so I was pretty experienced with how plans are gonna work and how comps are built.
Hmm.
And since we had only one coach at that time, which was Shifty, which came in shortly after me, I think. Um, I tried to fill in the role a tiny bit of assistant coaching. Like we bounced back and forth ideas pretty frequently, so we could like offer the guys the best guidance we could.
Okay. Now, when it came to signing the players, or at least approaching more of the players, pre British Hurricane,
Mm-hmm.
how did you really go about that? Was that just like a simple Discord message? Were you looking at free agents? Were you looking at kind of talking to people who are already signed to a team, or not necessarily signed, but playing with a roster that's maybe not signed? Was that, how did the process of approaching the players go for you? Because again, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think a lot of team managers have any idea of doing that. So, for all the wonderful, aspiring team managers out in the YouTube or Twitterverse, how do I really approach a player to kind of come play for me?
We had the luxury that back when we started building up the team, that there
Mm.
was no contenders yet. So there were like everyone was super scattered and everyone was a free agent. So what I just did was message people, "Hey, we want to build a team. We have this and this players. Would you like to try out?" I think we had a tryout process for at least a month or two till we signed the final six. We
Mm.
had a core of four, the famous core of four, pretty early on. I think after like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we settled on that as good as we could, and then we made like small adjustments. What I would tell the people or the managers, like you said, when it comes to approaching players that are under an org, try to reach out to the manager first, or like at least try to reach out to the player and the manager at the same time, because managers need to work around those possibilities of like replacing players.
Mm.
And so it's just fair to them to give them a heads up. Hey, I would like to approach your guy. I would like to get into negotiations, etc., etc. Or if it's like, even if it's just a unsalary team, it's always nice to keep them informed about what you're trying to do or what you're doing. It's just a chain of work kind of thing. It seems pretty unnecessary, but it's actually like it's gonna help you.
It seems like it's, part of, working with
Just polite.
organizations. Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
opening that communication up, so you're communicating with them, you have a good rapport. The last thing you want, as a layman kind of talking to the expertise here, you're the expert. It would seem to me that you wouldn't want to, have any sour grapes with another manager because they might not book scrims with you, right? Is that something that kind of could you possibly come up?
It could, yeah. I didn't encounter any of that, or I didn't like execute it myself. But it's always like it always has something to do with some sort of reputation. Like
Mm.
everything has to do with reputation in esports, to a certain degree at least. And being a good organized manager and being like fair to you and your opponents is always a nice thing to have.
That sounds like a very noble thing to do in this day and age. There's not a lot of communication to be had, so it's always good where you can actually talk to somebody
It's at
else
least
and
my
plan things out.
philosophy.
No, I'm right there with you. Trust me. Now, when it came to the specific players that you approached originally, what kind of went into that? What were you looking for? How did this roster come to be? Was it friends of friends? Was it exactly how did those guys roster really form?
So in the beginning, it was really friends centered, not really friends centered, but we had a core of friends,
Sure.
which was Hanzo and Craggy, which approached me originally.
Mm-hmm.
And then we looked for people that mingled well with them. Like one of the big focuses was, do the players play well? Are they committed to the team, or will they commit to the team? Which was really vague at that time because like everybody was building up. Um, and how receptive are they to feedback? That's still a thing that's just really really important to me, is how good does a player receive feedback. If you show that you're willing to learn and willing to improve yourself, it's way more valuable than getting a mechanically high skilled player that is so set in his ways that he's not a good team player.
Mm. Now, when it came to after you guys really hit the ground running with some of your events doing extremely well, how did you in the team manager role transition into, well, not really transition, I guess that's a poor way of describing it, but how do you go about approaching orgs? How did your ties with C9 start? Because was there other teams? How do you go about that? How do you go about communicating with orgs to be like, hey, do we kind of meet the criteria to be signed under a contract? Do you want to hire us?
What I did initially was building a team deck. I set myself down in Photoshop and built like those little like presentation cards with like everyone's best heroes with like prior achievements. Like for example, for Kib, I put down that he won those and those lands, played with Reunited in Korea,
Mm,
etc., etc., and just try to play with stats a tiny bit from Contender Season 1 and 0
okay.
2017 for those who were in there, and try to play around their prior achievements and prior teams to build like a team deck, you can say.
Okay. So
And
like,
which I
mm,
sent around to orgs, like to representatives that I knew, which was Jack, which was In a Flame from Misfits and Mayhem Academy, and certain other people that we approach from endemic orgs.
no, that's really interesting that there was there could have been another team out there that may have signed you guys. So that's really promising for other teams that there are teams out there that are looking and that are interested. At least there were. Who's to say these
Mhm.
days if that's still the case?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when you kind of approached the team kind of sponsor deck creation, did you have any experience with that? Kind of going back to the tournament admin days, is that something that you have any kind of familiarity with, or did you kind of just jump into it freelance again?
I just jumped into it like in my tournament organizer days. I always sucked at asking for money. I I was always like, I don't know. I'm just not good at it. Like
Mm,
asking for hey, could you give me like $500 for my tournament?
sure.
No. It was more like something I wanted to do for myself and for the team, just to present those players, because in in the bigger scheme of things, giving players opportunities is my passion more than like anything else. And so I was like, hey, this would be a cool idea, so I can present a team to someone without just talking to them, so they have something visual. So I just jumped into Photoshop. I think I even brought Photoshop just for that, and try to make it as pretty as I could with my limited skills.
No, it no leaks, but I did take a gander at it. I took a peek at it, and yeah, it was wonderful. You did an amazing job at it, and it was probably
Thank
one of
you.
the main reasons why so many teams were interested, because I think you really showed that putting out the initiative and putting out the effort in support of your team and your boys really kind of stood out to these organizers. So many tip of the hats to you in that sense, because again, I don't know that that's even information that's out there publicly, that this is kind of maybe not expected, but is extra credit for these people. It's important for that information to be out there. So it's wonderful
Yeah.
that you can kind of share that. Now we've kind of covered how the hurricane was built. Now, if we're able to, obviously, could we talk about how the hurricane has changed over the years? What did you start with initially? And we don't even really have to get into specifics, but what are some of the things that you started with in the team building process for those guys that changed now in 2018? What were some of those pillars that we started with those guys that kind of changed, or what were some of those ideas that kind of changed over time?
I don't think we changed too much. One of the things we that definitely changed is like how we approach the roster in general, because in the beginning we just wanted to do a flat out 6-man roster, just starters.
Mm.
And through getting signed with C9, we got the idea of having a seventh player on there to develop, which was Funny Astra at the time, which is now our starting support, because he showed so much potential and improvement over this half a year we had him now, that he just um outshined the other support we had, Crusade. Um, but other than that, I don't think our philosophy changed too much. We
Okay.
tried out a tiny bit with the 8-man roster in season 2, with having like two hit scan DPS, which we probably gonna be backpedaling a tiny bit from. We're not too sure yet
Mm.
how it's exactly gonna go, but I think we're gonna go back to the starting 6 and developing players, because developing players will help not only us but the scene in the long run.
No, definitely. It's one of those things that is often overlooked. Developing talent and giving those players those opportunities, like you mentioned, it's paramount when it comes to the bigger Overwatch scene as a whole. You want to start filtering in those talents. So it's great that Hurricane is a place that former or maybe lesser experienced players would be open for applications to. So get out there and play, guys. You guys can do it for sure.
Don't spam my email, please.
Don't spam your email. It's definitely not open. This is not a public forum for open applications. We're not.
Yeah,
It doesn't sound
we're
like we're having
gonna
open trials.
we're gonna post something if we're looking for a new developmental.
But just keep in mind, one day maybe we could reach the heights of British
Eyes
Hurricane.
open.
Eyes open, exactly. Now, when it comes to how you interact with the coaching staff, I know that there was some coaching staff changes, and we don't have to necessarily get into that specifically. But what's the interaction on a daily basis like from a team manager and the coaching staff, if it's multiple members or even if it's one member? What is that dynamic like?
For me, it's basically I try to act like some kind of supervisor, not really watching everything they do or like commenting on everything they do.
Mm.
But what I like to be is being informed, because I am basically the head of the team, more or less, because I'm the main communication to the org, and I'm like the main responsibility for how the team acts and how the team is portrayed. So I try to keep an open communication with my coach or coaches. Um, try to have them structured, as in what are the different tasks that we need to do for the week. Having a meeting on our off day is also a thing where we just set goals for the week to come,
Mm-hmm.
and just basically be in the loop and try to bounce ideas with them, so we have actually different perspectives for how we want to tackle a problem or how we want to approach certain players. As I said earlier, I'm not really good for mechanical stuff because I'm out of the game for so long now.
Sure, of course.
But I always try to help with like how to tackle attitude problems and how to
Mm.
tackle like coachability, because I actually have some kind of education in the system. Like I worked in elementary school for a tiny bit, so I understand a tiny bit of like how to approach people and how to talk to people in the correct way.
Now, when it comes to dealing with any kind of issues that arise, is that a joint issue, or is that a joint kind of group decision where you include the players in that? Is it kind of a democracy? How do you kind of deal with, seems a little bit too strong for what I'm trying to portray. How do you solve internal issues? Like if there's just a an argument in a scrim, right? How do you, with the experience you have, as a player, as an admin, as now, team manager of the British Hurricane, how do you go about that? Two players arguing. What's the first steps? What are the steps to kind of dissolve the situation?
For internal scrim stuff, like for stuff that happens during scrim time, I definitely rely on the coach to do the initial like breaking up the situation.
Okay.
I will always keep communicating with him via chat or something to ensure like he's not overstepping it or the players aren't overstepping it. If I feel like some of the players are, I definitely would jump in and try to be the authoritative figure that says it's fine now, it's okay now. Stop. We can talk about it like afterwards, or we pause the scrim to talk about it if it's like super necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I always try to, when it comes to problems outside of scrims, I always try to consider most opinions, also the opinions from players, not only the ones from coaches, not only my opinion. It's always like I try to feed off different people's opinions to get to a conclusion for myself, which would, in my opinion, be like the best path to tackle it.
Now, expanding on that hypothetical,
Mhm.
let's say this issue with this player just isn't or can't be solved. What's the best way, or what's the most proper way in your eyes to kind of, relay to a player that, hey, we're not, maybe this isn't a good fit. How can we move forward? If you need any help, here's my number. I can always help, but maybe this team isn't working out for the both of us. How do in your experience, what's the best way to kind of deal with the big, very difficult issue of uh, quietly or slowly removing a player? How do we kind of deal with removing a player from the roster?
It's definitely a process. It's not something that you should do suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, it's a process of how did you try to help the player at first? Like you see a problem, you talk to him, like you try to adjust it, you talk to him in one-on-ones, maybe like get additional help for it. If you are with an org, please use all the resources an org has for you. Like if they have psychologists, if they have like maybe a superior, like a GM kind of person, try to use that before you give up on a player immediately. There is so many people that like where players have like bad phases, where players have like attitude issues, maybe something that swaps over from real life, and that they just give up on him completely. So what I would suggest is give the player time and definitely keep up the communication with him to know what you exactly think the problems are and what you think he should do to improve on it. If he's acceptant to it, try to work with him a tiny bit and see if it improves or not, and then make a decision, because you actually informed him that it's gonna happen eventually if he doesn't improve it. If it doesn't improve, then you can always like take the next step, say, hey, we talked to you like 2 weeks ago, we
Mm-hmm.
don't see much improvement, we want to trial players now for your position. That's also a thing that can be some kind of a wake up call to just trial players for the position to make them realize, oh, I cannot do anything I want here. Um, because this is actually a professional environment where my space or like my place on the team is at stake if I'm not acting like I'm supposed to, if I'm not acting professional, if I'm like letting my practice slide or anything. And then you can always take the step because he's like prepared enough because you warned him like several times or you guided him through the process of we gave you chances and this is the cut now. This is where I as a manager, where I as a staff member, even as a coach, take the cut. I tried. I If you don't want to, I cannot do anything.
You touched on a very kind of poignant topic that I've always felt pretty passionate about when it came to, budding esports that we saw really early on, specifically with Overwatch, but we've seen, in multiple kind of, new esports as they come up. Do you still think, or do you think even then, the beginning stages of competitive Overwatch, do you think that teams act a little too quickly when removing players if something doesn't work, or even coaching staff, for instance? When we look at the Overwatch League, it seems like coaches kind of can come and go with the pace of the wind. So do you still think that's an issue, that we're not maybe trying to work together as much as we can? Do you think that's still an issue, or do you think that ever was an issue?
I think that definitely was an issue in the earlier days. Like I've experienced many teams that were very jumpy on things, but that was
Mm.
more unsalaried teams. I
Mm-hmm.
think salaried teams or like organizations think about those moves a tiny bit more than like unsalaried teams. But I would give this advice to any team, basically. Also to those that only have like a freelance coach or like a coach with them without like having the job security that others have.
Mm.
Um, at the moment, it's hard to say. You always have to evaluate the whole situation to judge that. And I don't know too many situations of Overwatch League or of like other teams to securely say something about that.
That's fair. I think that's completely fair. Now, when it came to the British Hurricane, you guys won season 1. How how did how did your job change in season 1? Did it change at all from those guys? Coming back onto that kind of main topic.
Yeah.
We started with those guys. Now we're in British Hurricane. We're playing in season 1, just to kind of give you the frame of mind.
Yeah.
How did your job change when you got that Cloud9 contract in hand? What changed about your specific role?
I think the main part that changed is that I had to learn how to work and operate within an org, how to communicate stuff to them and from them correctly.
Hmm.
Meeting deadlines, helping the players with like how to set up their financial stuff, um, coordinating with like all those different departments that I was not used to coordinating. I was a tiny bit used to it because of my tournament organizer
Mm-hmm.
days to work with like different departments of things. But like having a person that helps me set up travel, having a person that helps me pay out prize pools, having a person that sends my guys nice things if I ask them to. It's like so much of a getting to know all these people and getting to know how like the inner workings or like the inner I can't think of the word that I wanna use.
I
The
think,
clocks?
yeah,
The
that makes
clocks
sense.
word? Yeah. Is was one of the main things. The rest I just did like I always do, like the communication with Blizzard, the communication with my guys and with other teams. That didn't really change. It was literally just that I learned how to be a team manager in an org.
So when it comes to working with those multiple arms of those varying companies, whether it's a tournament organization, whether that's a large company like Blizzard, or even an esports company like Cloud9, could you go a little bit more in depth on what kind of information, not information, but what is really expected of you? Like, walk us through, for instance, like a day in the life of a Contenders team manager. What's kind of the day to day, wake up and what fill in the blanks for me.
So after waking up, I normally do. Yeah, I normally check my emails, check my Discord messages, check my Twitter, like
Hmm.
all the nice social stuff, see if I have messages. I try to reply to most of those messages. Like if I get emails about questions, about like players approaching, about people having other questions, or even like 5 messages about, hey, can we scrim at this and this time? I try to work those. Um, then I am also checking our internal communication, which is on Slack. Um, that that I check if there was something, because we're in different time zones. I'm here in Europe while they are in LA, so 9 hours difference. There is often things that get discussed when I'm asleep.
Sure.
Um, check those. Check if I have to go through, like if I have to message someone, if I have to set up something for socials, if I have to request graphics or something.
Hmm.
Um, once I'm done with that, like with checking everything, I normally take time and like do a tiny bit of workout lately. And then I basically just sit down in my PC and be ready to go. If I need to fill in blanks for scrims, I do this. If I have to like talk to the players about something that came up overnight with the org, I type up a message. If I have to have communication with Blizzard about like submitting rosters, submitting maps for the days, I go to my coach and be like, hey, can we talk later about like what maps we want to pick? I go over stuff that my coaches post in the prep channel, so I'm prepared for basically checking over it, that I'm being prepared for what we're gonna do in scrims, and then eventually, like in the evening, we start scrimming, and I'm sitting with them in scrims. I'm not going somewhere or going out. I'm try to catch every scrim I can with the guys to help them, to give my opinion about things, and to help the coaches, as I said earlier, bounce
Hmm.
back and forth ideas a bit better.
So it seems like you do have a pretty open line of communication with the coaching staff that you're with now. That you kind of do you guide them in where do you kind of guide that discussion, or do you actually put in input that you, as a former player, maybe they're misguided in something that they might think, or what is that kind of, what is that process like as a team manager speaking to a coach? What's your role in like a scrim? Do you actively participate with the coaches, trying to pick apart any issues in a strategy? Do you help develop strategy? What's the kind of role for a team manager in a scrim block?
Um, I think since I'm more of a very active team manager, I think there's differences between like someone that's rather active, someone that's not as active, which
Mm.
is both totally fine. What I personally like to do is I want to let them work. Like it's their job to do those strategies. It's their job to talk about things, and I don't want to take it away from them. I like a clear structure with my staff, but I try to give input like, oh, I really liked him doing this and this today. Oh, I really liked this person's communication today. Oh, do you also think that he's a tiny bit like upset, or that he is like overcompensating something, or that he's pushing out too far, etc., etc.? Like I throw in tiny bits of my opinion that they can think about and that they can communicate about amongst each other, more than like telling them, hey, tell this person to do this and that, or something like that, or tell Hafi to not push out that far.
That's
That's
fair.
not me. Hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're more of a, again, the
I would say catalyst kind of thing. Like
okay, that's a good way to put it.
I try to poke their brain with ideas that I may be seeing. Sometimes I'm totally wrong, but but sometimes it helps, and I'm just trying to do what I can to help those guys.
100%. Having an extra set of hands, an extra brain there, I can't imagine hurts anything, I would say. Now, when it
Yeah.
comes to managing scrims, back in the day, me, you, and the former head coach of British Hurricanes, Shifty, we actually did an
Mhm.
interview, and I believe one of you had mentioned that not scrimming a ton was probably a little bit more beneficial than just burning yourselves out. I want to say the quote was something about I'd rather scrim 4 hours of good practice rather than 8 hours of, mediocre kind of dull space brain practice,
Yeah, I think it
Is
was
that,
even me.
was that, okay, so it was you. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I didn't want to kind of like put you on the spot, but okay, you took the bait. You took the bait. Now, is that something that you kind of make an executive decision on when you schedule the scrims, or is that something that you also try to communicate with the coaches, get their take on it? How does setting up a scrim block go, and then how much time do you feel like is necessary to allocate towards practice?
I think when I'm booking scrim blocks, it's all about communication with the whole team. Since we have someone in a position that is still working a day job, which I still don't know how Bok does it, because he's working a 8 to 5, and then he's scrimming 5 hours, and then he falls dead into his bed or something. And he plays ranked in the meantime. But it's always like, do you guys, it's a balance between how much do the players feel like they are capable of,
Mm-hmm.
and what do the coach want to press for. What we did, like, our standard is like having 2 blocks a day, um but we up and down it, especially on weekends when Bok doesn't have to work quite frequently. So we have like more effective practice, less effective practice days, but we don't go like under a certain threshold. What I do is like I speak with my coaches about it, and I definitely speak with my players about it on how they feel. Like, if they sometimes they come to me being like, hey Noukky, we feel like we need more practice. Can we do like the additional 2 blocks on the weekends? And so I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, if the coaches don't obligate, we're gonna do that. If you guys feel like you want to prepare more, or you want to like put in more work, yeah, sure, we're gonna do it. Or sometimes we not really force them, but we highly suggest them to take a few additional days, or like to go over personal VODs or something in their free time. We give them sometimes give them even homework. Be like, hey, we have this scrim here prepared for you, like this map we cut out from the recording. Can you go over it and then send us your VODs in a Word document? And so they can like look at themselves a tiny
Mm-hmm.
bit, and then we gather this feedback and distribute it again, what we think was good points, and add to it.
Do you ever feel like your inner teacher kind of comes out when you're talking to the guys, where it's just like, your essay's due in 45 minutes, it has to be 1,500 words, and if you use the word so more than 12 times, you will be deducted points. The time starts now. Is that ever, do you ever kind
Sometimes.
of get that primal,
Yeah.
do you?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes it's just my boys. Just when I run after them for, hey guys, I told you this is due for this
Right.
day. Hey, did you forget it? Hey, hey Astro, did you get that for me? Do you remember?
Calling you out,
Hello?
Astro. She's calling you out. Better watch
No,
out.
it was just he's the one with the A in the name. I need to call him first. Okay.
Oh, okay. So we're doing it alphabetically. Again, there's the
We're doing
teacher.
it alphabetical.
There's the
Yes.
teacher. Call and roll call.
I mean, it helps a tiny bit having this experience. I would
I
say,
would
yeah.
imagine so. I would definitely hope that, being able to watch over, what, maybe 10 plus kids? How many kids would you say that,
Um,
you were in charge of or responsible for when you were,
in my
teaching?
in my classes, it were about, I think, 15 to 20.
Wow.
But I always was with the other teacher. Like, I was helping the kids that had a bit of trouble learning, so I was
Okay.
always like with them and like helping them. While the teacher was actually doing the normal stuff.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it was about that size. I can handle many kids. Give me a second team, Jack.
There you go. Team 2, British Hurricane Juniors.
Maybe like
Maybe.
academy team of the academy team.
Whoa. Now
I'm
now you're
down.
getting crazy. Now you're getting crazy. So when it comes to, the open division team managers, the contenders managers looking for advice, they're looking for help. What's 3 things that you wish you would have known coming into this position that, maybe your past experiences didn't really prepare you for? What are 3 things that you could kind of give as advice to, anybody that's within a team? What shouldn't you do? What should you do? What are your thoughts?
the number one thing, or like the number one advice that I would give someone, which is not a should or shouldn't do thing, is be prepared to not being able to do certain things.
Hmm.
Be ready to not be able to help the players during a tournament. Don't feel bad about that. Don't feel bad about yourself not being able to push someone the way you want to, or like the way you would wish for them to go. It's always a balance between what you personally can do as a person and as a manager, and what the players are actually taking from you as advice. You shouldn't beat yourself up about failures. You should rather learn from it than like be like, oh, I can't do anything, I feel so bad about myself. Just try to be the best you can for you guys, and then everything will be fine.
Now you touch on a go. Please go ahead. There's only
Yeah.
point one. You've got two other
Yeah.
points.
One thing I always like to tell people when they ask me about management stuff is
Mm.
like the clear line of communication that I talked about. I think at least 30 minutes now. Like I'm sounding like a broken record, but communication is key for this job. Like not only between you and your players, not only between you and your staff, also between you and the public, between you and casters, between you and so many other people that will help you grow as a person, and that will help you develop your players and nourish your players the way you need to. Especially like when talking to casters, it's always nice to give them like certain storylines that they can talk about, that because they will help you to present your players, and they will help you to push your players even further than you personally might can. um and a third thing you should do as a manager is definitely always not only respect your players, not only respect your staff, but also respect the other teams. One thing that is quite rumored now, or not rumored, but that's in the mouth of some people. I don't know how to say it in English.
No,
It's maybe
I
a
think
bitterly
I think we
wanky
can understand. Yeah.
because I'm trying to use German phrases, is that you respect the other team's privacy, especially when it comes to VOD stuff, to strat
Mm.
stuff. That's something that's a pretty hot topic right now, I know, but um respect other people. Just flat out that. Respect their boundaries, respect their line of work, and you will get respect too as a person.
So the golden rule, follow that. Treat others how you would want to be treated. I think that's
Yeah.
a very
Big big
powerful thing, even in these days. 2018, we still can fall back on
yeah.
that as a fundamental rule. So no, I definitely think that's pretty powerful and insightful for sure. Now to wrap this up in a big nice bow, let's double back to the boys again. The boys in the baby blue, the British Hurricane. As the team manager, do we have any updates? How's the team going? I know that I believe Broadcast GG put out there that trials is starting soon.
Mm-hmm.
How's the team looking? How are the boys preparing? How's the team preparing for trials?
It has been a pretty rough lately, or not really lately, but like a bit of time ago, with all the World Cup stuff going on, since we had like all of our DPS participating in World Cup.
Hmm.
We had people back and forth between World Cup team, between our team. We had like owl tryouts in the mix. We had like all those open tryouts and whatever.
Hmm.
So it was really hard to prepare. But now that we are about 1 week, 1.5 weeks in till we start,
Yeah.
and we feel good about it. Like
Okay.
we had some time to scout some people in case of something happening. We had time to work on what we think went wrong in season 2, and we're gonna go into the new season, or like into the trial season, I would say, confident after such a hard hit in season 2.
I think people harp on that hit a little too hard. Again, you started off season one very, very strong. You won the whole thing. You even upset NA. Now season two, you hit a bump in the road. It's no big deal. It happens to the best of us. Look at however many, fabulous teams, so many great teams in, all of the esports, any kind of game.
Mm.
Everybody has their ups and downs. So I think that, give them a chance. I think they're going to really surprise a lot of people when it comes to season 3 of Overwatch Contenders, because I'm sure you guys are going to make it out of trials. Let's be real. Come on now. It's the British Hurricane. You guys
we do our best.
I'm
sweep
sure
them away
you
like
will.
See what I did there? Totally funny.
Oh, it was
German humor.
German humor is the top tier of comedy, because we know that from our wonderful friends who are sitting in Discord. Now, going on to the future. So we've started with, your past and how the team was built, and then, as the British Hurricane. Now to the future. What's on the horizon for you? Where are you kind of looking to proceed? Again, this was more of an interview for the team managers out there, to give them a little bit more info, to kind of help guide them. Hopefully it was insightful. But what's the next plans for you? Is the Hurricane the end all be all, or is there, some grandiose future out there for Queen Noukky?
Stop calling me queen. I hate that. I think I have a similar goal than most people in my position, or like in the Overwatch scene in general. Like, being in Overwatch League would be kind of cool. If there's like maybe a Berlin team next year.
Who's to say?
Imagine
Maybe.
like a Berlin team with a German GM. Why not? No, but I'm pretty happy where I am right now. I'm not like chasing. Not really chasing. I'm hassling
Pursuing?
words. I am pursuing the ultimate goal, but I'm pretty happy where I am right now. I don't have to like be grieving or be like upset about not progressing, because C9 actually did really great stuff for me so far, and I always liked not only like working with players. I always liked helping them reach their goals, and developing players in the tier 2 scene is actually one of those things where you can help them progress and help nourish them and nourish the scene so it can grow within itself. Which makes me really happy and satisfied, actually.
Now, when it comes to the Overwatch League, you mentioned that, as a team manager for an academy team in the Overwatch League, obviously the London Spitfire and the British Hurricane.
Yeah.
How does that work? How do teams kind of approach you or your team and ask if they could trial these players? How does that work? How does that interaction between other Overwatch League teams and you as an academy team, how is that facilitated? What is kind of the procedure when it comes to kind of dealing with other people coming in to take interest in your players, I'd say?
It's as simple as either Susie or me get a message about like, hey, we are interested to trial some of your players. Since Blizzard put in this OWL trial / signing clause that Overwatch League teams are allowed to approach players freely within those signing periods that they have. So it's just as simple as, hey, I would like to try out Fusions and Astro, or I would like to try out Hafi and Kib. Just giving you a heads up, and then they approach the players directly after we got the heads up and schedule scrims with them.
Okay. Now, you'd love to be in the Overwatch League. Is that something, as a team manager, something that you want to continue to pursue? You mentioned general, just building the entire organization. What are you kind of interested in? Do you want to just be a team manager? You mentioned, again, being a GM. Is there any other kind of areas that you'd be kind of interested in? Content management, product placement, what else kind of are tickle your fancies, I say?
I think one of the like things I would also be kind of interested in would be some sort of assistant coaching. Maybe not on the mechanical side, but definitely on the like interpersonal side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think something like that. I don't know if I want to say it's undervalued, but there is like many teams look for coaches and assistant coaches, at least from my experience, to be like to help the players mechanically. But I would like to be on a level with like helping them to um helping them to handle their stress a tiny bit better, helping them to handle their communication between each other a tiny bit better. Oh my god, I said communication again. I said it like 20 times. Please make a drinking game out of this. Um
Drink every time.
drink every time I say communication. Um no, but something around those lines would probably be interesting if people are looking to hire an assistant coach for these kind of things. Um Maybe even something around social media. I always was kind of good with social media,
Mm-hmm.
at least like with how to present certain things. Maybe that would be also a thing. But I think working with players is really my passion. It would likely be something around the lines of team management, facility management, or even hey, I can cook.
Hey, she can cook. She can be your all-around mom if you need her to be. She can wrangle the players. She herds cats very well. She makes a mean stew. Why not? Why
I
not?
make them. I can do all kinds of things. I even am skilled with throwing knives.
Oh well,
Fun
now
fact.
we're getting into player abuse. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm still waiting for Jack to buy me the slingshot he promised me in season one.
Okay, I guess we're gonna have to make a part two because now we've got throwing knives. I need a stew recipe, and there's a slingshot in here somewhere. Is this some sort of like
It's just
strange
getting
Elon
ridiculous right
Musk
now.
like flamethrower? Where it's not a flamethrower? Is this like an actual
No,
slingshot or is this not a slingshot?
it's actually a slingshot. We
That's
joked
terrifying.
around when players are mean to be,
Oh,
and then he posted like one of those like in baseball where they have those machines who throw the
yeah,
baseballs where it's
the
not,
pitching machine.
yeah, and it's like super fast. And he was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, we just buy you one of that. Cool, yeah, do it
So
for
we're
boot
gonna
camp.
take Funny Astro and put him in a pitching machine, is what you're telling me.
I mean, he's not that small. He's actually like fairly tall. He's probably like over 6 foot.
Wow, tall boy.
Yeah, but my team like is really tall actually. Like I think the smallest me and Crusade were the smallest with like 5,
Mm.
10-ish, 11-ish. They are huge.
They're just large lads. What can you say?
Yeah.
Last but not least, one of the more recent things that you've personally done and kind of fills along with the same narrative of this whole interview. You were on the roster or the support staff for Team Germany in the Overwatch
Yay.
World Cup for 2018. So I wanted to kind
Yay.
of maybe compare and contrast a little bit. Again, it's kind of a team that is kind of thrown together within a time frame. So there are things that happen that that just happen in the case of just teams being constructed so quickly that stuff comes and goes, and there are bound to be issues with that. So how was that overall? Was there anything that you felt very prepared for from working with such a established organization, that you could apply to this project as a whole? What was that whole experience like?
I think if I wouldn't be working with Hurricane for such a long time, I would definitely have been underprepared for it.
Mm.
Because having so many different people thrown together from not only different teams but different backgrounds, and that sometimes even have like slightly different goals when it comes to what they want to get out of the team, it's definitely a challenge to coordinate. Like how to you have such a small time window of finding out how to motivate each person, how to talk to each person, and like what are the most effective ways to get them to push for the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
that it was sometimes actually a challenge. I would say it was a challenge at certain times. Yeah.
Would you say that's because of just the nature of being group of people thrown together kind of last minute in a sense, or was it something more?
Yeah, I think it was mostly because of the different ways they approached the World Cup, and the time we could actually spend together, because there was not too much time between the Contenders season. Like, some of them played Contenders and World Cup, so I didn't have like too much time to prepare. There was like coordinating with the support staff too, where I would have to oversee or like coordinate what my content creator is doing, what my coach wants to do, like talk to him. It was basically running two teams at the same time, which actually was like kind of stressful on me till
Can
in
imagine.
the end. Um, Especially when I was at boot camp with Team Germany and having to figure out like a certain situation that happened in Hurricane, or like keeping the communication in Hurricane up like I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
was a tiny bit difficult to balance back and forth. But
Would you
I'm
say
still
that
alive,
World
so I'm
Cup
fine.
was a primer for anybody who's interested in working either in the Overwatch League or even in Contenders? Was that like a very good representation of what like that professional level of communication and professionalism? Is that something that you would say is a good example, like working in a World Cup kind of team?
I would say for people that are rather unexperienced with communicating with tournament organizers, with devs like Blizzard,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a learning experience, and I really like how they structured it this time with the supporting staff. That you had like a manager, a coach, and a content creator, so you actually could embrace this structure that you normally have in organizations or in more professional esports, and emulate that for how you would like to run a team. Mhm.
As a team manager, I would be hard pressed to wonder if you've got any deals on flights. Again, I think that's maybe something that you have to take in mind. What's the best strategy on how to book flights? Do you have any secrets, any kind of trade details? Are you even the one booking the flights?
No, I'm
No.
not. I'm sometimes helping to look for some, but
Mm,
it's mostly through
just the
our
org.
travel person in the org. Yeah.
Oh, it must be nice.
I normally I normally communicate with them.
Mm,
Like, for example, for World Cup, I also booked all our travel for the whole team Germany,
mm.
because we decided to take a train ride instead of flying, because we were like, hey, it's probably gonna be fun and we can be all together, and we don't have the hassle of like getting through security and stuff. We can just hop on the train and sit there for 5 hours,
Oh,
um,
jeez.
and just be together. And so it was quite funny. It's always nice to communicate with those people, like with the travel agents and stuff, when you when you post them at German train side and be like, hey, we need to book this and this, and then it goes back and forth till we actually figured out how it works on the English one. It's it's quite an adventure sometimes.
I mean, that's esports, though, right?
That's esports,
Throughout the
yeah.
entire hour that we've
Especially if
spent
something
talking.
goes wrong.
Oh, I mean, come on now. Going wrong in
Yeah.
esports, like, that ever happens.
Delaying flights, like visas missing. That's nothing that happens in esport.
No, definitely not. Now, I think we've provided a good enough information, and if there's any other questions, feel free to either at Noukky. I've left her Twitter handle below her face. Please ask her. I'm sure she'd don't let me speak for you. Would you be open to fielding any advice
Mhm.
or feedback from any team managers out there that would want to reach out and ask you some questions?
Yeah, I'm always open. Like, my Twitter DMs are normally open for everyone, so you can just slide into those or into my Discord DMs. If you want to do it like for management stuff, I probably prefer Twitter, because my Discord DMs are loaded anyways.
Mm.
So if you really want to reach me, try it through Twitter. If you have questions about management, if you have questions about tournament adminning or organizing, I'm always happy to help.
Well, that is it from me. Is there if there's anything you'd like to end the interview on, feel free to do so as Mr. Hot Rod drives by my house.
I would definitely like to thank you for getting me on your first episode of this,
Well, you're
whatever
the
it's
guinea
gonna be
pig. I don't
called.
know how this is gonna look. Hopefully it works, but you know, I appreciate you coming on. But continue, please.
Yeah, I think I said everything that I wanted to say. I hope I could like give a good impression of what I'm doing as my job as a team manager, and for everyone that is interested in getting into management. Um, and yeah, just do it for the kids or the players,
Do it
something
for the
around that
kids.
lines.
I like it. That's going to be the title of the episode. So again, thank you, Noukky. Thank you for anybody who stuck with us this long. You all get a gold star on the chalkboard of Noukky's teaching room. So until next
Oh yeah.
time, I will. I'll see you, and for Noukky, we'll catch you guys in the next episode.